Get it? That's life. Yes. Okay. I don't know. So we are moving on to serious stuff. We're looking at setting the table yet for Paul. Paul is in trouble, accused of bringing in. Jews have always looked for a reason to get rid of him, as slander that Paul had desecrated the temple, which he did not, because they were chaos. Paul is being shipped around. Where in the world can he get a fair trial? Be safely held. Couldn't be in Jerusalem because there was this governor who had replaced Pontius Pilate. Puts him in jail for 2 years. An offering, all in all, his missionary. Not until he gets justice served. So, governorship replaced Festus, and like I said, it's not the gunsmoke guy, someone else, but. And Festus, he. Now we talk. Festus is challenging Paul. For 2 years, this is a no-win situation. In Acts 25, and he says, Paul, to Jerusalem. Now why does Paul's permission to change the venue? So he has to respect that. So is smart. He refused. No, he will not get a fair trial there. Very hard to give safe passage from Caesarea to Jerusalem that he made. So he ends up, and this is where we in your over the accusers. He appeals to Caesar. Appeal to Caesar, and to Caesar you shall go, which means that's. Meantime, as he's waiting for a ship to take the prisoner to Rome, Jewish visitor meet with Festus. Agrippa. Now, Herod Agrippa is a grandson of Herod. So this Herod family, half Jewish, they're Edomites. Let's know your trivia question today. Edomites descendants of? Who are the Edomites? No, not Ishmael. What did you say? You could go also with Noah. Noah. Okay, we got Adam and Noah out of the picture. Okay. They are descendants of Esau. You got a person, a puppet for Rome, the Herod family of Esau. Do you think the descendants of Esau? No, they handle the Jewish problems. So Herod had done a lot of things for Rome, and Rome then it went on into his family. So this is where I just want to set the table up with this discussion, knowing that Herod Agrippa is basically he is a puppet king of without Rome, authoring. This is the governor from Rome in that area. So Festus is going to have the more power. Acts 25 to 22. Someone.
Now, when someday had passed, case before the king, saying, left prisoner by field to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him. It was not the custom of the Romans. Before the accused and had opportunity to make his defense concerning him. So when they I made no delay on the tribunal in his case of such evil. Who is dead, but whom Paul, being at a loss, but when Paul had appealed to be kept in the custody, him to be held until I could send myself tomorrow.
around. He comes and rises. Festus is at least a compassionate guy. Convicted one way or another, he dies or he's senior reason why we have to take care of a prisoner. You got to feed him. Something that Festus wants to know. Did he do any delay? As soon as he got there, it's like, who's in prison? And he got a good way to take care of it. He got it off his docket by having Paul appeal to Caesar. And what was he surprised about the hearing of, they call the grand jury indictment, maybe in our terms? The accusers came up. They had nothing deserving of the imprisonment. I don't get this. What does he understand the whole issue to be about? The resurrection. They had some points of dispute with him about their and about a dead man named Paul claimed was alive. Now, do you think Festus inkling to the idea that Jesus was raised from pretty clearly stated that this is dumb. There's no one that rises on my plate here. Be taken care of. I mean, it's going to Caesar now, but Pontius Pilate, where did all these Roman governors want this stuff? Let them take care of their own stuff. What do we know about their religion? The reason why they for what? Rome was the only one that had power to, so they could have taken Jesus out. Not because they're looking to Rome for this. They know that Paul is he's a Roman citizen. It's against the law to crucify a Roman citizen. Now, the Jews are basically in agreement. But why does Festus Paul and the Jews take care of this themselves? Why? Why don't they just, fine, Paul, go and you guys go to the, you knock it out and whoever comes out standing wins. I don't want to know. Why don't the governors, if he dies on the way, he dies on the way. If he's,
Because he's a Roman citizen.
they appealed to Caesar here, but not with Felix. Maybe that's a protective right that these governors are concerned about. justice. Nobody thinks good enough that they're really concerned. And yeah, I want to give them benefit of doubt, but more than likely, no. System's going.
I don't see justice.
Yeah, you don't see justice arrested by Felix because Felix would have let Paul go if Paul would have done what? Well, no, that's Festus. Felix was willing to let Paul go if Paul would have done what? And Festus, he just wants death. Now, go over my head and of nursing students on me as well. So I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel. What they were reporting on is that I was supervisor handled it very well. And he said, I said to Dr. Mark Koshman, I said, how do you want me to handle this? And to you and talk to you in person. I said, fine, set up a Zoom, I'll talk to him where I'm coming from. What I was talking about in my question of when it starts off is the mythology. Now, I know that mythology word is not what I want to say in the fact that I'm denying historical. I'm not. It's just when you talk the word that mythology is, as James Cameron communicated what that meaning word is it's a story, basically three things. Why are we here? What is our life the way it is? Does not creation give? Yeah. So it's a myth. So I say, all right, so an evolution, because it can't be proven. Why are we here according to evolution? According to evolutionary theory, why are we here? Chance. That's the thing. We have none. So that's the second thing in evolution. Number three, why is life the way it is? How does evolution? And Andrew, you're right on. Survival, the theme. So with countries, because we're all everyone's trying to become their own. But you see, they were going into this. Man, they missed the boat entirely. They into the class. I'm approaching the class with not the way you run it. Not the way you respond. Answers to the question is the other aspect of the evolutionary theory versus there's nothing after death. Why is death necessary in evolution? Improve better. Looks at death as part of life, circle. Is there perfect society? Not only will we reach the will be so improved that we will not die. But death is important to happen until and basically he said, if we're basing this off evolutionary theory, if we don't have be here, the amoeba must organism to get to humanity. Does it look at it as a part of life or an enemy of and prove that to me? So watch for those words in evolutionary theory where they take leaps of faith. Proposal is a leap of faith. Extrapolate is a leap of faith. Because you can't prove a change of species without proposing and without extrapolating.
Darwin
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking at Festus and I'm going back to this. He says there's a dead body, and Paul was proposing what happened to the dead body. What did Paul propose? The body rose. Now, when you recognize that you are putting a proposal before the world, just because you propose it, does that make it a definitive argument? No. In order for Christians, what do we believe has to be the convincing seal the deal thing that people are going to accept the proposal as fact? Faith, which is given by Spirit. Yeah. And I hope that when you sit and do dialogue with your culture today, that you understand that you are having to also argue from faith, not from science, that we are also using the words propose and extrapolating, because I could have said to this individual in class, I could propose on what data that the body was raised. What data do I have to support my proposal that the body of Christ has been raised? I don't have eyewitnesses that are alive. The Bible is one. And number two is the existence of the church, right? Would the church be around if this was not true? Why would we be even celebrating Easter? So that's my data. I have the scriptures and I've got the history of the church. And from these two things, I propose that Christ was raised from the dead.
You look at like the Greeks who came up with all their mythology that we study now for fun. And we know it's not true because nobody believes in Zeus anymore. It's like a real entity. Maybe somebody does. I'm sure somebody does. But you know, for the most part, nobody really follows that faith anymore. But it was a powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long it was a powerhouse, but it fell.
Right.
And same with many other faiths and religions that we study is like, oh yeah, this used to be the way back then.
Right.
But when you look at Christianity, it's kind of like it gained momentum over many years. It has a longer story, and it turned into something, a climax, and now it's like we're living out this faith. Does that ever come up as an example of?
Yeah, I mean, in our class, we bring up Chinese mythology, which shows that they also have a creation story. And their creation story actually
take it as a religion. Here are these facts.
Yeah.
I was debating with a young lady at a university back in the 90s. I'll always remember this. And her little book said the earth was, the weather was 4.5 billion years old. And I said, give or take how much? Exactly 4.5 billion years. Could it be plus or minus 10 years? And I said, then tell Professor whoever that wrote the book, Dawkins or Hawking, I forget, that he was wrong because that book came out 13 years ago.
Yeah. St. Paul, Portland, no. Oh, I look at that to see how many Portland students I'm going to have. But they take the class because Concordia's got to figure it Was it a mistake? No, because by appealing to Caesar, he was going to go where? Rome. And where did he want to go? Rome. So he kind of knew what he was doing. And but if it would have been up to Agrippa, he would have said to Festus, I got nothing to write on your charge, so why don't you just let him go? Does anybody have the King James Version according to Acts 26:28? King James Version, can you read that in KJV? This is an interesting translation difference. Acts 26:28. Got it? King James, anybody? Yeah.
Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian.
Yeah, okay. Do you see the difference? You see the difference there? According to the King James Version translation, Agrippa was almost ready to be what? Converted. But according to NIV and ESV, the Greek is translated in the way that you think you can actually persuade me. So what does the Greek say? I'll tell you next week. Suspense. Same bad channel, same bad time. You gotta come next Sunday now. But as you can see, there's something funky going on between King Agrippa and Bernice. If you read through that, we'll look at that next week too. Something funky. So, yeah, let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask, O Lord, for you to continue to keep us strong in the faith when our world is attacked. There are so many Festuses out there that question, O Lord, what we believe about Jesus and his resurrection, what it means for our life. There's so many people that disagree with us about the three main questions of existence, of why we are here and what's our destiny and why life is the way it is. Help us, O Lord, understand that all humanity asks these questions. And maybe a conversation, we just talk about answering those three questions to build bridges to the gospel. Help us to know, Lord, how to do this and to be strong in it.